Okay. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to After the Election, Which Way Forward for the Left, a panel presented by the Platypus Affiliated Society. The Platypus Affiliated Society, established December 2006, organizes reading groups, public fora, research, and journalism focused on the problems and tasks inherited from the old 1920s and 1930s, the new 1960s and 1970s, and post-political 1980s and 1990s left for the possibilities of emancipatory politics today. We are located on campuses around the world and run reading groups and public fora year-round. You can find us virtually at platypus1917.org/virtual. You can also find the Platypus Review, our forum in print, online at platypus1917.org. And you can check out our podcasts, Shit Platypus Says, on SoundCloud or Apple Podcasts. So today our panel is titled After the Election, Which Way Forward for the Left? The 2020 presidential election in the US saw the majority of the American left place its hopes in a Biden victory, with admonitions that dissenting critical perspectives wait until after the election, when a Biden administration would arguably present greater opportunities for the left moving forward. Yet no clear consensus exists on the left as to what sort, if any, of opportunity the coming Biden years represent. Looking forward, does a Biden administration meaningfully open new opportunities for the left? If so, what does that look like? If not, how should the left think about our present moment and where to go from here? After 2020, which way forward for the left? Okay, so our panelists, in the order they will be presenting in, are Benjamin Studebaker. Benjamin is a recent PhD in politics and international studies from the University of Cambridge. He is a member of the University and College Union in the UK and a former co-host of the What's Left podcast. Next, we will be hearing from Gerald Smith. Gerald is a founding member of Berkeley Copwatch, a member of the Oscar Grant Committee, and formerly of the Black Panther Party and the Spartacist League. After Gerald, we'll be hearing from Greg Lucero. Greg is a founding member of Chicago Independent Teamsters, Utah Against Police Brutality, and the Revolutionary Students Union. Next up, we'll have Jonah Martell. Jonah is a DSA member from Tallahassee, Florida, and a contributor to the Cosmonaut magazine and the Weekly Worker. Okay, so the way that this will work is that we're going to give each of the panelists about 10 minutes to give their opening remarks. I will signal the panelists when they have 2 minutes left, and we'll follow that with a quick round of responses, and then we will open it up for audience question and answer. And for the audience, you'll be able to ask a question either by typing it into the Q&A box or by raising your hand, and I will call on you so that you can ask your question out loud. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Benjamin.
All right, thanks. In my view, the left's decision to support Joe Biden was a grave mistake. Donald Trump was never the threat many people imagined. He wasn't a real right-wing authoritarian, he just played one on TV. The intelligence services and military officers loved him, and without their support, he never stood any chance of establishing himself as a dictator. His own Supreme Court nominees are completely unwilling to help him stick around. He talked a big game about tearing up trade agreements and pulling the US out of the international system, but the trade to GDP ratio never budged. The United States remains in NATO. The new version of NAFTA is nearly identical to the old version of NAFTA. The sky was never falling. From the very beginning of the 2016 campaign, American liberals took Donald Trump's rhetoric far too seriously. Trump offered the forgotten men and women of our country the catharsis of seeing a president say the kinds of things they would say, but he didn't deliver real change. I am much more worried about Joe Biden. Beginning with Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign, much of the American left has pursued a party capture strategy, attempting to infiltrate and commandeer the Democratic Party. I myself vocally supported this strategy, but Biden leaves the approach I loved in deep trouble. Historically, moderate Democratic presidents not only fail to move the country to the left, they move it further right. They promise to help ordinary Americans while presiding over more right-wing policy, leaving those Americans resentful and sympathetic to right-wing messaging. Jimmy Carter appointed Paul Volcker chairman of the Federal Reserve. Volcker raised interest rates and drove up unemployment, creating a nasty recession in 1980, which fueled the rise of Ronald Reagan. Once elected, Reagan was free to continue Carter's right-wing monetary experiment. Bill Clinton cut Medicare and welfare spending in pursuit of a budget surplus. George W. Bush went on a campaign to return that surplus to the American people through tax cuts. Those cuts, of course, went to the rich. Barack Obama's support for sequestration led to chronic underinvestment in America's rural areas, with most rural counties continuing to experience negative job growth between 2010 and 2016. Trump won by promising not to forget about these parts of the country, and then spent his whole presidency pumping up the stock market to high heaven. Carter turned Gerald Ford into Ronald Reagan. Clinton turned the first Bush into the second. Obama turned W into Donald. These Democrats don't succeed in reversing the rightward trajectory of American politics. Instead, they accelerate it. People tell us this time is different, but the left is stronger now, that it's going to be able to hold Joe Biden to account. But this isn't the first time such promises have been made. And so far, these people have been wrong. Biden isn't giving a cabinet position to Bernie Sanders. He's not even giving a cabinet position to Elizabeth Warren, even after she did everything she could to hurt Bernie's campaign. Instead, people like Neera Tanden and Rahm Emanuel are in line for jobs. The left yells and screams about this, but Joe Biden doesn't care. Biden has always considered the left a liability to the Democratic Party. He is anxious to show corporate America how little he cares about the left. He believes the Democrats would have won a powerful majority in Congress if the left would just go away. He will use his administration to load the Democratic Party up with a whole new generation of millennial careerists. Biden's inauguration will launch tens of thousands of Pete Buttigieg's into every level of the Democratic Party. These people will gain the experience and connections they need to logistically dominate us for decades to come. How will we react to all this? The early signs are not promising. Instead of building on Bernie's 2016 success with fringe voters from the Rocky Mountains, the Great Plains, and the Midwest, we've been trying to win in blue cities on the coast where Democrats are already highly competitive. Our candidates win the same way progressive liberals win, by scorning the culture of rural Americans, demonizing them as deplorables, and leveraging identity as a credential. This strategy wins handfuls of seats in Democratic strongholds, but it has destroyed our ability to build the kind of mass movement which might deliver on Medicare for all. Already, the policies which the 2016 campaign brought to life are receding from view. Bernie Sanders' movement is now leveraged to build careers for fringe politicians in heavily gerrymandered blue districts. Those fringe figures are used to drum up support for conventional Democratic presidential candidates like Biden. These conventional Democrats betray and alienate voters until they are ready to vote for the next openly vicious Republican just to rid themselves of the Democrats' hypocrisy and empty moralizing. So where do we go from here? The easy response is to treat into antique revolutionary strategies from a bygone era. Electoral politics is depressing, and it's satisfying to immerse yourself in Lenin and Luxembourg, Trotsky and Kautsky. But the civil society organizations of 100 years ago are gone. American unions, even at their strongest, were powerless to resist Carter and Reagan. Revolutionary praxis now consists of little more than isolated reading groups and activist cells with little connection to the wider working class. They promise to educate the workers, but capitalism has become very good at taking workers' time and energy for education away. The very premise itself betrays the separation between these movements and the workers they aim to serve. What's more condescending than telling someone they're not educated enough to contribute to a movement that purports to belong to them? Then there's the push to break out of the two-party system and forge third parties. But in many areas of the country, political parties are required by law to select candidates through primaries, and those primaries can easily be flooded with outside money. The primary system continues to funnel dissent back into the two parties. No third-party presidential candidate has won a state since the system was instituted. This pushes us back toward party capture. But the strategy is failing. The movement is being assimilated back in the Democratic Party, becoming a way of marketing progressives who exist mainly to shepherd resentful voters back to centrist Democrats by the general election. There is, however, another party we might capture, the Republican Party. As Donald Trump's ascent shows, the Republican establishment's control over the party is weak. Republican voters are alienated by our institutions and despise many of their own leaders. They are tired of being talked down to by liberal elites. We aren't competing for these voters. We dismiss them as insufficiently educated and improperly organized. In doing so, we make them easy prey for the far right. The more the Democrats fail working people, the more of them there will be. And the longer we refuse to compete for them, the more of them will end up on the right. Donald Trump wasn't a real right-wing authoritarian, but the Democratic Party is slowly subjecting our working people to more and more alienation and exploitation. A time is coming when the American people will be ready to support dramatically radical political movements, but the right is poised to take advantage unless we change our approach. We have to put the culture war to one side. We have to stop talking down to working class Republicans. In the states and districts where they have the numbers, we stand no chance without them. If our capture strategy in the Democratic Party is going to focus on blue cities, we need another capture movement which is tailored to the needs of rural areas. The Democrats have no credibility in these places and they deserve none. We must realign the Republicans. That is the path to a Senate majority that can deliver Medicare for all, majority that can open the door to the creation of new economic and civil rights. On that foundation, we can reach for the world of our dreams. That's me.
Oh, sorry, can everybody hear me? Okay, great. So next we will be moving to Gerald Smith.
Yeah, it looks like Benjamin done messed around and gave my presentation, except on this question of capture. Who will capture who? And sometimes the hunter gets captured by the game, my dear brother. So I do not believe that the left in any state of health can capture the capitalist corporate parties. I call them the twin parties of capital. But let me begin in the beginning, okay? Okay, excuse me. I'm not quite as professional as Benjamin is in terms of, his eye contact and everything. You did wonderful, man. But I want to talk about, I have to mix my presentation in what I'm doing, because actually it's a little different out here in the Bay Area. I came out here, worked as a longshoreman, and in my first year of longshore work, we wound up having a labor boycott against Chile. We refused to unload the bomb fins. I know this is way back before you guys were born, maybe in the 70s, but this was after Pinochet had taken over. And this made Marxism, for me, not just a nice idea, a neat, argument, but a program for victory. And workers, my fellow workers, embraced it. And for many years, we had a fairly strong movement of class conscious workers in longshore, and still today. And I'll answer any question anytime about this. So understand there are pockets of resistance that still exist. Don't dismay and look at things, say, oh, well, we can't win. No, don't believe that shit. Not only can we win, I believe in something called revolutionary optimism. I believe that we will win. And the reason we're going to win is because they are screwing us up. And you were right to criticize Mr. Biden. But let me start. Okay. First of all, I once again don't need to repeat it. The Democratic Party today is trying to be the Republican Party of tomorrow. When I was a child, the Republican Party of yesterday, excuse me. When I was a child, we had a Republican mayor, John Lindsay. Now, this is before you guys were born, but this guy was against the death penalty. He was against victimless crimes. He was the mayor of New York. The Republican Party has devolved and has become, something else. But as far as I'm telling you, I do not believe that the Democratic Party is qualitatively better. I do not believe that. In fact, what they did, everything they did in this past election was to just be a little bit more appealing than Trump, just a little bit. And that's why the damn election was so close. In fact, if you notice, Trump said during the campaign, during the primary campaign, that if single payer came across his desk, he would veto it. That's what he said. So let's be realistic and intelligent in our approach. So the problem is we have a classical crisis of leadership. The proletariat does not even look at itself as a class, let alone the most advanced section of American society. Through a number of reasons and faults, the level of class consciousness of the proletariat has actually gone down, if that's possible. It has. And it's too bad, but this can quickly be reversed. Let me give you an example of why I'm so optimistic. In 1968, a university in the United States was assigned to work at Renault the car factories. And they interviewed all of the workers and they said, well, what do you really want? Come on, what do you really want? And the workers said, well, we would like to have our representatives on the board of directors of the company and blah, 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 and they laid out basically a kind of reform, social democratic vision, okay? And they released this information and people thought, okay, that's where the working class is at. Oh yeah? Well, anybody that knows what happened in the year 1968 knows that there was a general strike in 1968. Those workers were electrified by the students, the French students that were revolutionary at that moment, and the entire society broke out into a general strike. That is how quickly things can change. Don't get your foot stuck in the toilet bowl. Don't get the idea that, all is, this is, no, people want better. But they, as Lukács points out in his History and Class Consciousness, the proletariat will only move when it thinks it has a chance of winning. And that's reasonable if you think about it for a minute. Okay, let me continue. So we have a classical crisis in leadership, but this can quickly change, as I just stated. You can see the confusion when I'm looking at Black Lives Matter demonstrations and demonstrators literally dancing in the street because Sleepy Joe won the election. This irrational exuberance is what? Is a display of total confusion. People are confused. We need leadership. And that's what we're trying to resolve right here today. We're trying to lay out, some of the paths necessary for us to recover. Okay. I mean, I don't have to, I really don't want to talk about Biden too much because he's such a pathetic creature. Remember, he's talking to that black man, said, well, hell, if you ain't voting for me, you ain't black. I looked at that fool. I said, holy shit. Trump might win. I thought, I said, they might blow this, but that's a wrong thought because it really doesn't matter. They are the same. Fundamentally, they are the same. Okay, I want to just say then, wow. The Oscar Grant Committee is a mass organization. So believe it or not, we have Republican workers in our organization. This causes some tension, but we constantly raise to them that, listen, your Republicans have nothing to offer you but a raggedy flag, unemployment, and Oxycontin. And that's basically what they've been giving the white proletariat. I think we're better than that. That's the basis of my optimism, okay? Just to finish off, I could go on and on about Biden and his crime bill, Biden did this, Biden. He has nothing to offer us. In fact, when he's inaugurated, he's going to say, my fellow Americans, I promise you nothing. And now that you dumb some bitches done elected me, that's just what you're going to get. Well, I think we have something else to say to the proletariat about the only road, and that requires a complete break, not a takeover of the Democratic Party, and establishing a workers' party with a revolutionary program. It is every bit possible. It's something we can do. And I think we have to publicly criticize the DSA leadership that came out with this pledge right during the election, even though the overwhelming majority of the DSA voted for Bernie or bust. These gentlemen decided to violate that, and there's no excuse for it. They came out against the majority of the DSA who wanted to only support Bernie, talking about we have to support Trump. Nonsense. That was a betrayal, writ small, because the DSA, even though it has 80,000 members, is not really the vanguard of the proletariat at this moment. We have no vanguard. That's the ugly reality that we have to all work against. And as far as I'm concerned, Marxism, or what I call scientific socialism or classical communism, maintains its importance to the proletariat of this world. My time is up. I'm hoping that I can answer some of y'all's questions, but as far as I'm concerned, that has not changed. Workers of the world will rise again. Fascism, never. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Gerald. All right. Now it is Greg's turn.
Thank you very much. I am deeply honored and humbled that you would ask me to speak on this, especially given that you've heard me speak before and that didn't scare you away. So thank you. First off, please, I ask your audience for a little bit of leeway. I just came from work and I started work at 2:30 last night. So I'm not 100%, but I'll try and hit the points, and I'll try not to go super long. So the real question is, okay, Biden and Trump won. So what do we make of that? First off is, and it's very important, we say, well, okay, what does it mean that Biden and Trump competed and Biden won? But then that is the first question that has to be answered. And then the question is, well, then what do we do about it? And I'm only speaking for 10 minutes, hopefully. I'm notoriously bad at going long, so hopefully I'll stick to the game plan. But I will try to address this as much as possible, and I will try and answer any questions to the best of my ability. Whereas normally I just phone it in and give it 50, maybe 20%. So the first thing that we have to think of is a joke. And it doesn't start as a joke. I'll give you the original first, but then it later becomes a joke by Slavoj Žižek. The original quote is by Stalin. And he's talking about the Soviet Union, and there's various factions forming, and what your opinions are on various factions is not relevant right here. But then he says, this is direct quote from Stalin, and it's from the right danger in the CPSU, which is the Soviet Union, or the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. And what he says is, and he's talking about the danger. You see, therefore, that both these dangers, the left and the right, both of these deviations from the Leninist line. the right and the left lead to the same result, although from different directions. Which of these dangers is worse? In my opinion, one is as bad as another. So let us just very briefly return to this same formulation and Zizek. And Zizek obviously butchers the actual quote, but he says, Stalin was asked, which is worse, fascism or liberal capitalist democracy? And he has the proper response, both are worse. And that's what we should say. Who's worse, Trump or Biden? Both are worse. What we should not do is we should not soft pedal at all. At all. We should not soft pedal at all Biden. And we should also, and along with that, we should not be celebratory that, oh, Trump is gone, this fascist is gone, blah, 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 and so on and so on. Rather, what we should say is Trump is awful. He's an awful, deplorable human being, but also Biden is awful, but in just a different way. And so what we should never do is we should never find ourselves in any way giving any credence to either wing of the capitalist party. So here's a question. First, and responding to those who are like, well, you know, Biden sucks, but at least he's not Trump. Trump's a fascist. So let's talk about that. Is Trump a fascist? Certainly Trump is a fascist. In his personal notion and politics and what he's trying to do, he believes in a unity, the dissolution of civil society, the dissolution of rule of law, which is a traditional capitalist, bourgeois, liberal understanding. He thinks he should be the decider. Now, and what was so strange is the Republican Party went along with this, and I'm sure I have said it somewhere. You can look at my Facebooks. I perhaps have even said it on and Platypus panels. Is Trump a fascist? Yes, he certainly is, personally. But when we're talking about politics, we're not talking about him personally. Does he have any power or ability to institute fascism? Absolutely not. One has to just simply look at the election. How quickly, what was the organization that ultimately said Biden won? It was the Republican Fox News, or Republican Fox News. I want to put the quotes in the right place. They said he lost. And also you'll notice the people Trump put in place as Supreme Court justices are absolute crackpots. They're right-wing, they're anti-workers' rights, they're anti-women's rights, they're anti-civil rights. But also, what was their response to his appeal to the Supreme Court? Nah, bro. I mean, it was, of course, dressed up, but it basically came down to that. So even though he personally may be a fascist, what we need to do is we need to understand that although the Republicans were going along with what he was saying, they were going along with him as an idiot to be used. Now, I understand that people are like, oh, but that's fascism writ large. Maybe it is. I didn't think it was. Many people didn't think it was. But here we have the Republicans returning to their project of neoliberalism once again, which is to say, all the institutions that workers won in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, to get rid of those and give a free market capitalism, which is nonsense in numerous respects. But let's just be clear, that is the Republican goal. That's to return to a clear-cut, undifferentiated neoliberal agenda. And I'm sorry, I don't have my notes in front of me right now, but someone even mentioned that, oh, Trump got rid of NAFTA, but then instituted essentially the same thing. So that's one. So what should we make of Biden? Biden is a return to the normal status quo. Now, let's be clear, the normal status quo, any criticism you have against Trump can be leveled almost certainly against Biden, except for his haircut. Obama had much better hair. So besides that, but if you're talking about going to war, deportation, assaults on a family, both through immigration and police, it's very clear that Obama did all of that, and did Bush before him and Clinton before him. So what should we make of Biden? What we should make of Biden is we should ask the question, because, and you heard it so frequently. Oh, well, Trump's a fascist. What is important to understand is fascism is not necessarily a clear-cut concept. For example, Colombia's government is fascist, but they have two parties. So everyone is looking for Hitler. Biden is American fascism. So I'm sorry, I'll be very quick about this. So what's the left to do? And I promised the Platypus people I would talk about Mao. It's the difference between the Popular Front and the United Front. Popular Front, instituted in Spain in 1936, was we need to do everything we can to defeat the fascists. And Stalin supported that, which, that didn't go so well. Now, what's important was in China, there was a similar, ostensibly similar aspect, which is the United Front, which is we will unite against the enemy, but we will not make defeating the enemy the sole criterion, and we will not dissolve ourselves into our enemy. And it's very interesting. The ultra crazy left Revolutionary Communist Party, who's so crazy, ultra Maoist, supported Biden, and then all the various, normal Marxist-Leninist parties also supported Biden, which would be right-wing garbage. I just to say is right-wing garbage. But it's important to note that the DSA, as an organization, this PSL, Party for Socialism and Liberation, as an organization, the Communist Party USA, as an organization, did not come out in support of Biden. And I've gone on. Thank you so much for your graciousness.
Thank you, Greg. All right, Jonah.
All right, thank you. Can you guys hear me? Excellent. Yeah, so really appreciate your having me on. I'm looking forward to this. So I think it's pretty obvious that we on the left, we are addicted to Democrats. We are buried in this coalition that wants absolutely nothing to do with us. And we've seen it all before. None of this is new. Back in 1972, George McGovern ran for president. What did the establishment Democrats do? They smeared him, said he was too far left, said he was a radical. The AFL, under George Meany, abandoned him, left him to get bulldozed by Nixon. Jesse Jackson ran in 84, ran in 88. What did they do to him? They beat him both times. Those of us on the left, many people just like us thought that his Rainbow Coalition was going to lead the break, lay the basis for a new independent left party. But that didn't happen. He bowed to Mondale. He bowed to Walter Mondale. He bowed to Dukakis. And here we are in 2020, just watching this same thing having played out all over again, with Bernie being forced to bend the knee to Joe Biden and sheepdog his voters back in line, not once, but twice, yet again. And so the question, do we just keep fighting the good fight? And that's what I hear people say lately. We just have to keep up the good work and hope that we get a break next time. But I'm just not interested at all in fighting the good fight if that just means pounding on the same brick wall for 50 years over and over again. So we need something new. Bernie played by the rules of the Democratic Party, and those rules beat him. We need to invent our own rule book, a new set of rules. And so how do you do that? How do you build an independent movement in a political system that hates third parties? How do you mobilize a popular majority, a governing majority, under a constitution that hates popular majorities, that's designed to keep popular movements out of power? So those of us with Cosmonaut, we're trying to grapple with these questions. And our philosophy is we want to take the good old school Marxist revolutionary strategies and apply them creatively to an American political context. And what we want DSA to do is get on a 12-step program for socialists to break our addiction to Democrats. And so step one of that program would be declare political independence. Put out a statement to members, even if it's just internal, saying that we consider ourselves an independent socialist party and we expect our members to act like that. And even if we don't have recognition, even if we don't seek legal ballot access initially, that doesn't matter. The philosophy should be we define for ourselves what a socialist party is. We could start calling ourselves the socialist movement, the movement for socialism, offhandedly, or something similar, but really take responsibility for defining what socialism is to the American public. Remember what Joe Biden said a while back when Trump was red baiting him. He said, I am the Democratic Party. I think that it's time for us to say DSA is the socialist movement and take responsibility for that. Step two, short point, would be hold annual conventions. Right now, DSA is only doing that every 2 years, but we're not a stable country anymore. Things change a lot, things change quickly. So we should be engaging in really regular reevaluation of our political strategy. And so we could do something like have one online convention one year and one in person the next, but just constantly be reevaluating what we're doing and how to move forward. Step three would be form statewide organizations. Right now, DSA, the national organization, is dealing with this absurd situation where they have to manage 235 local chapters spread out all over the country. If we integrate them into statewide groups, then they'll be able to coordinate with each other, break into rural areas where they don't have a presence right now, and contest state policies and adopt statewide platforms to fight for the interests of working people. Step four would be adopt a nationwide political platform. DSA is already on this. They're working on a platform to be voted on in the summer. We want it to be a good platform. Our idea is that it should be a platform that fights for a completely new political order, a real majoritarian working class democracy. And it should be something that all of our candidates take seriously, that all of our candidates are willing to accept, if not agree with every item in it, to at least accept it and fight for it. Step five would be nurture a committed membership base. We should learn from organizations like the NRA that use services to draw people in and build a mass political base. We should standardize dues and maybe even consider increasing them because dues aren't something that we should look down on or stigmatize. They're the lifeblood of an independent movement. And in the past, we've had pushback and a desire to abolish membership dues. We should do the opposite. We should be standardizing them and celebrating them. So step six would be run dedicated organizers for office. Electoral work is critical for a revolutionary socialist movement. There's this idea that it's an inferior good. It's just one good among many. We use it to complement the street fights, complement the tenant struggles, stand beside the union organizing that captures our attention. We use both of them in combination, and we can do mass outreach to the public with our electoral work. Now, what we say, though, is no more embedding ourselves in this abusive coalition like Bernie, no more aligning with Democrats. Our candidates would not caucus with the Democrats when they took office. They wouldn't take committee appointments from Democrats. Instead, as soon as they entered the legislature, they would be raging red rabble rousers. They would push socialist policy proposals, promote them, stump for them everywhere. They would provide constituent services, and they would assist local organizing projects, union struggles, tenant struggles in their communities back at home. And they'd take no more than an average worker's salary. The rest would go back into the movement. And they would pledge to fight for the program and vote as one block in the legislature. So step seven would be stop endorsing outside the party. This is a whole new model of electoral work that we want DSA to adopt. And we would say that once we have a training program for it, stop endorsing people who aren't embedded in DSA. We want to pour all of our energy into backing dedicated candidates who will vote as a bloc and uphold the platform in the legislature. Step eight would be choose ballot lines at the state level. And the idea would be instead of fighting endlessly for a third-party ballot line, we would just run independents wherever we can, and we can use that to target individual districts instead of having to worry about running top-heavy presidential campaigns to try to get ballot access. And if ballot access was hard, we could run in either major party primary, but we would do something very differently from what we've been doing before. Our candidates, they'd run in the primary, but then the instant they won, they would just abandon their party registration, re-register as independents, and they'd go off to join the rest of our rabble-rousing socialist backbenchers. And it wouldn't even be limited to running in Democratic primaries. We might run socialist Republicans in Montana, but in practice, they would be serving as an independent party as soon as they got elected. Instead of the dirty break with the Democrats being something that happens 20 years in the future, it would be something that we do every single time we win an election, and it would drive both parties insane. Step 9 would be target the House of Representatives. We say run a national slate of candidates from Washington to Florida, from Michigan to Maine, and use the House as a national soapbox to really try to publicize our demands. We'll be speaking to people coast to coast, and that lets us dodge the presidential campaigns until we have a large enough base to seriously contest it. And running at the national level for the House, making that institution a priority, that gives a huge visibility boost to our state and local candidates. So that will be helpful for them as well. A rising tide lifts all boats. And the idea is if we try to eventually run in all 435 congressional districts, we could be forcing this referendum on our political demands every 2 years. We need to start conceptualizing revolutionary politics in this country as a national struggle for power and not just local organizing work, integrate the local organizing. Step 10 would be organize for electoral reform, end single member districts, fair electoral processes for third parties. We would push for those reforms by initiatives wherever we could. Let's see, step 11. Step 11 would be shoot down war budgets. Vote down anything that jacks up military spending, anything that funds the police. We could demand that party leaders break up omnibus bills, but vote them down even if they refuse. There's this incipient anti-war sentiment in American society, and we need to legitimize it by agitating against the Pentagon and against the endless imperial wars. And then step 12, something that would really be different. Demand a new constitution, a new union, a new constitution developed by mass popular participation and then ratified by a simple nationwide majority vote. A constitution that guarantees real democracy, majority rule, housing, healthcare, economic rights. And we demand that Congress initiate this process, but if it doesn't, the people have a right to do it themselves, and they will one day. And so, is that demand batshit crazy? Am I going off my rocker here? And no, it's not, because there are legal theories that the Constitution can actually be amended by referendum, and we'll invoke them as necessary. And this demand, it will alienate most people at first, but we strike a chord with a few. And every year we just build it out, leaning into every crisis until finally something snaps. So yeah, that's our 12-step program. And the underlying philosophy that we have is that political independence is not some distant end goal that we earn after working hard enough for the Democratic coalition. It's the foundation of political struggle, something that we should be doing right now. Because our end goal is bigger. Our end goal is a world historic revolution in the United States of America, an independent working class revolution. And yeah, we're just trying to come up with some starting points for that. So yeah, that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jonah. All right, so thanks to all the panelists. So now we're gonna have some time for responses. So we're gonna try to keep the responses to about 3 minutes. I'm gonna just give the audience a quick reminder that you can begin submitting your questions in the Q&A box. If your question is directed at one of our panelists in particular, please be sure to indicate that. And again, you can also raise your hand and I will call on you to ask your question in person. And to the panelists, please don't answer or address any questions in the Q&A box until I've read them out loud. So now we will have 3 minutes for each of the panelists going in the same order that we spoke to respond to each other. And just to kind of give a little recap and kind of reminder of summary of what's kind of been discussed. I think there seems to be what I'm seeing is a general broad agreement about the necessity for socialist independence, at least moving forward, except for maybe Benjamin, who advocates more of a party capture strategy. But in any case, the differences seem to be mostly around the question of how to go about achieving that independence, whether that's running independent candidates or attempting to build an independent workers' party. Those are some things that you can feel free to address in your responses, or address anything that you felt you wish to address from the other panelists. So let's jump right into that, and I will start with Benjamin.
Yeah, very interesting thoughts, guys. I'm sympathetic to the motivations underpinning Gerald's argument for a third party. However, in 47 states, there are laws on the books which require political parties to participate in state-run primary elections and abide by the results of those primary elections. That means outside money can flood third-party primaries, and any third party that we found is open to capture, just like the two parties are open to capture. We can't legally use members-based parties to protect a new organization from capital. We can't use the strategies which we used before the primary system was instituted, and we can't follow the example of European left-wing parties. And this is an element of law in the United States that I think in general we just don't pay enough attention to. It's very difficult to run a party on the European model in the United States legally. Very difficult. Now, maybe there's an argument for starting an illegal organization, but I do think that's something we have to wrestle with. I do think we could start an organization which selects candidates to run in the primaries of existing parties, but this non-party organization could be insulated from the primary process, a kind of quasi-party, which isn't a party because it doesn't run candidates on its own ballot line, right? Now, the DSA is often thought of as potentially this kind of organization, but it's pretty passive about candidate selection. It allows candidates to petition its organizations for support, but most of the branches don't purposefully and deliberately draft candidates. That means that only Democrats really bother to seek out the DSA's support, and those Democrats quickly betray the DSA once they become incumbents and have access to the establishment's more extensive resources. And because the DSA largely only supports Democrats, it can't threaten to support Republicans to punish Democrats for those betrayals. Too many DSA leaders have careers in the Democratic Party or in organizations affiliated with the Democratic Party, and they kill alternative strategies in the crib. In terms of policy program, I think we need to prove to people that we can deliver real benefits to them to earn their trust, because as it's been pointed out, if workers don't think they're going to get anything from something, they don't bother to go out, and they have a lot of mistrust, which is well-placed mistrust in electoral outfits. So I do think we have to prioritize getting discrete benefits to people. But once we do that, then we can establish a baseline set of economic rights that we can build off of in more ambitious directions. But yeah, the main thing I would say is on this third-party independent organization point, this primary system instituted after '68 dramatically changes what we can do, makes our situation very different from pre-1972 United States and from Europe. And we have to take seriously that institutional difference.
Okay, thank you, Benjamin. We'll move to Gerald next.
Yeah, there go Greg, because that's somebody I wanted to address. I'm gonna try to keep it. You know what? I'm very pleased that y'all thinking. Restless minds are thinking. This is wonderful. But Greg, this is partially for you now. If I don't think you're right when you say Trump is a fascist, brother. I want to say no. What he does is he politically exploits the fascists through an unprincipled alliance and leans on them. Okay? He is not a fascist, really. No. And we don't need to redefine the term, because we got lucky, Greg, because the fool came out the way he did. Class conscious workers can learn and understand the threat and the real problem of fascism. Now we understand it. it really, it's a real distinction. And I'm sorry, he's gone. God damn it. Well,
Yeah, Greg's having some internet issues.
no, that's okay. That's okay. Because I think he's important, and I was addressing him not in a personal way, but politically. I wanted him to hear this because also he is falling into the same trap that many of my supporters that I work with. There's a revival among young people of third period Stalinism, and that's because they don't know about it. They don't understand that it was third period Stalinism that led to the victory of Hitler in the first place. And it's really important that we re-examine that period and understand that this argument that the DSA are social fascists is a false argument and is not a road to victory. Also, so that's for you, Greg. Oh, Greg, never mind. Benjamin, I would agree with most of what you said, actually, except I don't agree with the capture theory. That's all. That's it. And yes, I'm a member of something called the Peace and Freedom Party, which was a ballot party in California since the 60s. And I recognize that you're right. There are legal problems. Problems are to be solved, brother. Don't give up. You know, we can't necessarily do what's most convenient for us. Sometimes we have to confront serious problems and surmount them. And Jonah, you know what? You done, look here, you laid it out. And I think that most of what you said, I tend to agree with. But I don't know if more conventions is, it's the left being better organized inside of the DSA that makes us more effective in the conventions. That's the problem. It's just a ball of confusion. Greg, did you hear anything that I said? He's got a problem.
So,
Okay.
Greg logged back in on his roommate's computer under the name Jake. So
I understand poverty. I deal with it in the Oscar Grant Committee. I deal with it in, so not every worker has Wi-Fi access. It's a shame. But I just think I will contact him after the meeting because I do want to continue our discussion on this third period Stalinism. It is a road to nowhere. I just wanted to say though on Jonah, the only thing that I think we have to be guided by principle. The only road is a hard break with the Democrats. I don't agree with you guys on that. See, I think it would be different if we were running our own candidates and we also decided to, try to split the Democrats and wreck them from inside. I would be open. But without that outside organization and political independence, it winds up just being a jive game. And I want to warn you about that. I thought, though, your presentation was very intelligent, and I really enjoyed it. I'm going to stop. My time is probably up. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gerald. So Greg, if you're there and you're able. Okay.
Is this coming through okay?
Yep.
Okay, I'm terribly sorry. My roommate is also watching this, and so I got most of what was said. So of course, the person I'm going to mostly address what I have to say is Gerald, because I was specifically addressed by him. First off is the question of the Stalinist third period. And I know I know all of you on the panel know, but just so for anyone who doesn't know, the Stalinist, I'm sorry, computer issues. The Stalinist political line was that fascists or the bourgeois Weimar Republic are just the same, and it doesn't matter. We should fight both of them. And so they didn't form a popular front against Hitler, and this is frequently said as it was the reason why Hitler came to power. That may be the case, and this is a historical question that definitely needs a long discussion, preferably over beers. But I was only very briefly able to deal with it. The difference between a popular front and a united front, that's very, very, very important.
Yes, it is. That's right.
Get a chance to make a decision. What Stalin argued is the popular front, which is we must defeat this. It doesn't matter. You know, you got to vote for Biden, which they say now. But also, the United Front is, yeah, okay, we need to defeat this guy. But, and this is very important, we're going to maintain our independence. And so that's one. And we can talk about it. But also, the other question is Trump a fascist? And this is something very absolutely important. Is Trump personally a fascist? And this is the second question, does he represent fascism politically? Something totally different. Do I think Trump represents fascism personally? Absolutely. I don't think there's any question about that. However, does he represent politically? He does not. He never. Plenty of people on the Stalinist, Marxist, Leninist, Trotskyist, you name it, have said, "Oh, we gotta vote against Trump because he's a fascist, and we need to blah blah blah." It's not true, and I've said that constantly and consistently. It's not true. While his personal views may be whatever, alter the nature of the political power and the political system. Now, I'm very concerned who gets elected.
Greg, you're cutting up again. You might try turning off your camera, Greg. All right. Well. All right. Well, Greg, if you can hear me, I recommend turning off your camera. That might help us.
Perhaps I'm going to say perhaps.
All right. Well, we have to move on for now. Your 3 minutes are up anyways. But yeah,
I recommend, brother, excuse me 1 second, Tom. Yeah. I just want to say, if he gets it together, maybe we could give him 3 more minutes, because I think he was actually trying to address, some very important matters and technical problems. This happens with working people. We often don't have our thing together. I'm just fortunate.
No, I'm fine with that. If Greg, if you can hear me and you can get your internet, or if you can disable your video, we might be able to hear you and let you wrap up. But I'm going to move ahead to Jonah for now, and hopefully, we can circle back to you, Greg. All right, go ahead, Jonah.
Sure. Yeah. So I think I'll just start by kind of responding to Ben. I agree with you. We don't want to hop back on the gerbil wheel of conventional third parties if that just means rushing to set up state-regulated utilities that we don't even have control over our own candidate selection. That's not something that we should be aiming for. Where I would disagree with you would be, I would just say that we should prioritize independent bids and aggressively move towards internally recruiting our own candidates. I think that those are the most important steps that we can take towards political independence right now. And it's hard to say. I think that what we're really trying to grapple with right now is how do we set up an organization that is a party, even if it doesn't have legal recognition as a party? How do we build up that independent political force? yeah, and I think that the move towards internal recruitment and doing independence absolutely wherever we can is the way that we accomplish that. You've said that we should try to abandon the culture war and run in Republican and Democratic primaries. I would say, what kind of organization do you want to do that? Would there be one organization for the Democratic infiltration and one for the Republican one? And if we're abandoning the culture war, what does that actually look like in our day-to-day political work? Does that mean that we're running an anti-abortion Republican in Wyoming and a pro-choice Democrat in Colorado right next door? And what are people going to think of that? Uh, if that's what it actually looks like. I'm just curious what it actually looks like in practice. Not saying that that's actually what you're proposing. Uh, and to respond to you, Gerald, I get your concern about the sort of running in primary tactic that I'm suggesting, and that's not my hill to die on, because I agree with you. We should really be trying to run to disassociate ourselves from both parties as much as we possibly can. So that's the reason that I want the independent bids. The only circumstance where I would support those wrecker strategies are in states where you have to collect so many signatures to get on the ballot that we would just be wasting our time standing in an intersection when we could be going out and talking to people and really organizing our communities. And uh, and I would suggest that we be using these wrecker strategies, like refusing to actually serve as a Democrat or a Republican upon election, and joining the independent caucus, and really agitating for electoral reform to get rid of those unfair ballot access requirements. But yeah, that's not my hill to die on. And I think that wherever we can reasonably get even just one or two independents on the ballot, that's what we should do. Uh, yeah, I think that's all that I had.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jonah. And we've got an extra minute here. So, Greg, if are you there? Can you hear me? Were you able to get back on?
I'm on my roommate's computer. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah. Did
Okay.
you want to make some finishing remarks to your comments from before?
Yes. First off, they were mostly done with Gerald. By done, I mean give time. Again, this is a multi-beer, multiple-time conversation. One thing I wanted to say is one of the panelists. I'm sorry, I don't have my notes in front of me because it's not my computer. Advocated joining the Republican Party because the Democrats are a dead end. First off, one, yes, Democrats are a dead end. That does not then follow that you join the more right-wing, more ostensibly right-wing party. So I think that's a terrible idea, but I've already taken up far too much of your time and offered far too many technical problems. Perhaps through the questions it will come up, or not.
Okay, great. Thank you, Greg, and thank you, everybody. Now we're going to go ahead and move to opening things up to the audience. We've got a few questions already in the question and answer box, so I will go ahead and ask Stefan's question. This is addressed to all the panelists. So Stefan says, the conversation seems to be centered around elections and the left somehow taking power through them. How is this connected to Marxism's conception of the party? What are the historical lessons from the left we need to remember when we are talking about a vision and necessities for the future of a real left-wing party? And then he added one more addendum to his question. Is there really a political question between the socialism of the Second International and the DSA's socialist turn? Oh, Gerald, you're muted.
I think that we should not get confused about the actual differences between the DSA today and the Second International, because I believe they are twins. I think that that's a different thing, but I want to share a little bit about what I believe is a revolutionary approach to elections. And it's not that I think that we, now I'm talking about the election movement we organized out here. Let me just share it with you, and then, you know, y'all can criticize, learn, whatever. The teachers had a strike out here. So I formed a committee out in East Oakland, a desolate part of Oakland with not yet fully gentrified. And we formed this little movement to support the strike, which was aimed at the parents of the children that went to school out here. So basically, what did we do? We had pro-strike meetings. We had, we recruited people to go to the picket lines, and the DSA does some things very well. The electoral research that the DSA did was essential because they found out how much money all of the school board candidates receive from Go Public Schools. I took that information and we made a sign with the picture of the school board director, how much money they got, and what district they were from. As a result of that agitation on the picket lines and in demonstrations and marches, every one of those they resigned. They resigned. They did not run again. This was a good thing. When workers saw the signs, we didn't have to make a long speech. They got it. They understood. We ran people that were opposed to Go Public Schools, that was opposed to setting up the charters, opposed to privatizing the school district. That was the theme of our approach. And as a result, I was things didn't work out just the way I wanted them to. And you know how organizers are, we a little subjective. But in reality, here was the results. They spent over $1 million to defeat the classroom justice movement at the polls. We had, you know, our candidates. We defeated Go Public School in spite of the fact that Bloomberg gave them $200,000 and gave the Charter Schools Foundation $300,000. This is what we're running against. The coalition I built was the OEA, that is the Oakland Education Association. It was the left wing of the DSA on this matter. Oakland is not for sale, and something called Oakland School Elections Action 2020. So that was our coalition. We defeated Go Public School in 3 out of the 4 races, in spite of the fact that they spent over $1 million for a school board election. Guys, I don't think maybe y'all, that's a lot of, when I ran for school board in 1996, I ran with $3,500 and I almost won. I had 46.1% of the vote. That they put $1 million. This is where, Jonah, you were more right than you think you are. We have to fight. That shit has to end, where they can put unlimited money into election campaigns with all of these dark money PACs and it's sick. But we beat they ass. And it's very important to understand we can't program first, comrades. We are against privatization of schools. We told the workers agreed with us for the most part. So I want you to know we can win, but we have to start off as we are, small. We didn't do anything on this Joe Biden stuff. That wasn't a part of our thing was to get rid of the privatizers. And we did it to a large extent. I want to stop then. I don't want to take all of our time. But praxis, you got to do something with the workers. And when they see what you're doing and you win, you gain respect from the workers. So I think that matters. I'm done.
Okay. Is there anyone else thank you, Gerald. Is there anyone else who would like to address Stefan's question? And Benjamin, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say that in terms of Marxism and the history of revolutionary movements, it's important to bear in mind that Marxism is scientific socialism. Therefore, it responds to changes in political economy, changes in political structure. It is not something static which sits in the past. And that means that the strategies that we use have to reflect things that are changing. It has to reflect changes in political economy over the last century. It has to reflect changes in our political institutions and the laws governing parties, the laws governing elections over the previous century. And Marx had absolutely no intention of Marxism becoming a dead dogma rooted in conflicts of the past and the material conditions of the past. If the reason that Marx says no blueprints is that we can't know precisely what the conditions will be like when socialism is finally able to flourish. All we can do is look at the situation we're in and go, what makes most sense now given what we're looking at? And a lot of the strategies people talk about from the past failed under much more favorable conditions than we currently enjoy. And so we have to wonder if they failed even in the 30s, even in the 70s, when we had a lot of other things going on. Should we really try them again in the 20s when the civil society organizations which previously underlaid those efforts are mostly gone and eroded away or subsumed into the Democratic Party?
Okay, great. Thank you, Benjamin. And Gregory said he would also like to address this question.
Yes, there's a very important reason. I've spent talking about the.
We're losing you, Greg.
And many people better now.
You're still cutting out. Yeah, I'm sorry, Greg.
Okay, hold on one second. I'm gonna go to the router. I'm gonna take it right there. Sorry, can you?
That's
okay.
better. This sounds better.
Okay, hold on. I'm gonna have a seat near the router. One thing that is absolutely vital, and I mean this wholeheartedly, is the reason we've talked about it is
Yeah, we lost you again, Greg. All right. Well, if you're able to get a better connection here, we can circle back around to this, Greg. But we aren't getting anything at all right now. Okay, let's move forward. Jonah, did you have something you wanted to say on this question?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah. So the question was, the conversation seems to be centered around elections and the left somehow taking power through them. How is this connected to Marxism's conception of the party? What are the historical lessons from the left we need to remember when we are talking about a vision and necessities for the future of a real left-wing party? And is there really a political connection between the socialism of the Second International and the DSA's socialist turn?
I'll try to touch on some of those briefly, I guess. I would say that that we can learn a lot from socialist movements, particularly during the Second International era, but that tried to build a model of electoral politics that was based on building the power of a mass movement instead of trying to seek committee appointments or personal connections or ministerial positions in government, but just tried to run candidates across the board wherever they could and combine it with economic struggle, combine it with worker and tenant organizing and building up this mass membership base. I think that I'm sorry, I'm brain dead this evening. I haven't done a lot of panels before, but yeah, no, I don't have much more on my mind for that.
Okay, no, that's fine. So the next question was actually for you, Jonah. I'm going to go ahead and read it out loud so everyone, so the audience can hear. So, what do you think distinguishes progressive Democrats like AOC from socialists ideologically? This question is from David, and David says, "I heard you mention I heard mentioned on the panel Medicare for all as a litmus test. This pales in comparison to the horizons of the mass international socialist parties of the Second International, which posed the possibility of world revolution in the early 20th century. Others feel free to jump in as well.
Okay, I can do this one better. I think that AOC and a lot of the other left Democrats in Congress, they view socialism as sort of an attention-grabbing buzzword to make themselves stand out from the pack. And I think that they just vaguely view it as meaning social services of any kind, anything that improves quality of life. And I think that differs from the older revolutionary socialist conception that viewed socialism as a mission to bring freedom and democracy to the working class. And I think that Medicare for all can be part of a socialist program because it reduces workers' dependence on their employer. So even though it's a state service, it would still increase the power of the working class. But it would be integrated into a wider program that would include democratic reforms to the political system, a real break with the existing political order, and also just common ownership of the means of production, actual collective ownership, and not just social services. I think that the use of socialism as an empty buzzword has been really damaging for the movement because the majority of Americans still have a negative impression of socialism. And that's okay because the word makes us stand apart from the pack. But it's really important that if socialism is going to be a knife, we need to use it to cut ourselves into an organized political constituency and not just a Twitter following or a rebellious fashion trend. So that's a very important task for DSA in the coming years, is to step up and turn socialism into a collective political movement with a platform.
May I just comment on the OAC thing?
Yeah, absolutely, Jared. Yep.
Look, I'm actually quite pleased that she seems to be very intelligent. She seems to uphold her dignity inside of a very reactionary social body where she has been referred to as a bitch. Do you believe this? So I kind of like her on some level. I feel, some empathy towards her. But the question is, of course, program first. This is where Jonah's absolutely right. And the problem is that it's not just the DSA, it's the social democratic conception of organization leads to basically giving a blank check to your candidates. And that is not good. That is not good at all. That feeds into personality worship, celebrity worship, and cultism. And I think it's harmful. I agree with Jonah on that. I want to stop.
The questioner asks about horizons and the reduction in horizons. I think it's important to bear in mind that because we have been so unsuccessful at delivering anything to working people for many, many decades now, there is a need to demonstrate that we can actually do something for people, to get them to actually care and to re-engage with politics. We have a lot of people who have become politically disengaged because they've completely given up. And we come to them with these big horizon sky-high things. That to them looks like the same kind of left-wing organizing, which has been irrelevant to their lives for a long, long time. We have got to actually deliver stuff for people and raise their expectations for what they can demand from social life, not just from the state, but from social life in general. And Medicare for All is a very, very basic element of what is used in European politics to demand more from states. It's just part of the very basic foundation you need to even begin to get people to think a little bit more wildly about what they could potentially demand. And it's a reach from where we are strategically to get enough people in office to potentially implement that, let alone something more ambitious. But I do believe that it's a non-reformist reform. It will unlock further potential down the line once we get to it. But first we have to get to it, and we're still a ways away.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I see Greg is back online. Greg, are you there?
I am here. I am not going to turn on my video because my internet is proletarian as much as myself. I did not hear the full question, so I will just, but thank you. Yes, I am back.
Okay, great. And just quickly, the question was about what distinguishes progressive Democrats like AOC from socialists ideologically. And so, right, like what distinguishes, since the demand for Medicare for all was brought up, what distinguishes socialists from, say, New Deal, welfare, liberals?
Yes, what distinguishes them from welfare liberals from the 30s is there was a strong communist party that put pressure on the liberals, and the liberals said, "Oh, man, we're going to take over." I know it's very prevalent on the left, such as it is, to say, "Oh man, AOC actually really sucks. Bernie actually really sucks." I find that a very tired, uninteresting argument or assumption. My position is not, oh well, yeah, we just need to replicate AOC and we need more AOCs and more Bernies. No, I think what we need to do is we need to build an independent movement that concretely focuses on real changes, much like the brother Gerard does, and focusing on school boards and issues and police brutality, and that we make our movement a movement so powerful that then it's real easy for us to walk in and say, "Hey, I'm running for school board," and people are like, "Oh yeah." When my kid was being harassed by the teacher and they were singling him out because he was black or brown, yeah, that's who I want. That's the person I go to. And we have to make our home in the working class. Again, not criticizing the strategies or the programs or the plans that have been presented as such, but I think it needs a different orientation. But in any case, thank you very much.
Okay, great. So as a follow-up to that question, Chris asks, what about socialists delivering for people in terms of civil social organizing, including but not limited to direct concessions for workers from capitalists, as well as mutual aid and so on, instead of government-provided benefits or changes in policy or laws?
Well, I think in a lot of places, we simply don't have the numbers or the capacity to do that, especially if you're looking out at rural areas of the country where we have very small populations. We don't necessarily have people on the ground in every community at this stage. And to get people on the ground in every community, I think we have to get some policy stuff done. I think that we will get more people on the ground as we inspire more confidence, but I think it kind of goes the other direction. I think that in the kind of environment we have now, where there's been a hollowing out of civil society organizations, we are forced to start with parties. As much as we don't like parties, as much as parties have disadvantages and rough edges and all kinds of issues with them, we don't have other kinds of civil society organizations which provide a comparable base to parties and organizations which directly interface with the electoral system. And I do think that it's possible to build out from that and build up more people who are more committed and more involved. But first, we have to get people back into politics. And right now, we have huge numbers of people who are completely disengaged. And it's nice if you could do something for somebody, but you have to show how you can get something for them politically.
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, I have a different experience, Ben, and this is not some nasty personal attack, okay? But I want to say, when I was in the Panthers, we started this thing called the breakfast program. And I was a little mad dog Maoist. So, naturally I'm running around. We should lead the people, not feed the people. That's stupid, blah, 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 But I learned something through my experience. Because through that experience, we actually developed a relationship with the Black community. that we did not have prior to that. That relationship got so deep that in some situations, for instance, New Orleans, when the police attacked our offices, people from the projects fired on the police with us in defense of the Black Panthers. You have to give people, you have to get people to buy in, and sometimes the mutual aid, while I don't consider myself an anarchist, to be honest with you. I mean, I go crazy dealing with them, but I work with them all the time. I just went to a mass bill where we made 200 masks, and I take those masks and I distribute them in my community because I don't want people to die from the corona. And people understand that. Bro, there's nothing
I'm not
wrong.
against it in cities. I'm not against it in cities where you have the numbers.
Yeah,
but I'm talking about the rural areas where we don't have people on the ground.
Okay, but check this out, Ben. Ben, just hear this now, because I agree with you, first of all. We're not in disagreement. But what we need to do, see, we actually have 2,000 people on the books in the East Bay DSA. We need to be sending help to these smaller rural districts where the fascists are running people off the freeways and shit like that. We need to be sending cadre to help them organize, you know, pro-abortion marches in their communities. Because when you have 10, 20 people surrounded in a sea of reaction, it helps if they get 5 organizers to come and help them out. So I just wanted to suggest that. And I want to say for Jonah, look, it's true the majority doesn't understand socialism at this moment. But what builds my revolutionary optimism is following the last economic crisis. That was when Obama came in. There were over 300,000 young people that read Capital. That is very important. Restless minds are looking for solutions. Don't get stuck in our little tunnel vision. Let's look around here. Capitalism is not looking very good, in my opinion. I think we have a very, very bright future. I'm going to stop.
Okay, Jonah or Greg, would you like to address this question?
Jonah, if it's all right, I'd like to go ahead before my internet dies again, if that's all right. Okay, I'm just gonna go and see how far I get. So first off, I understand it's odd. There's this question and that you raised, which is, well, we need to deal with the political issue rather than the civil society issues, but really civil society is very important. And this is a phrase that's thrown around frequently by various people of various ideologies. I have yet to see a clear line of distinction between the political and what is civil society. Civil society is a park. Okay, that's civil society. It's beautifying. It's a place where you can have stuff. Okay, but also there's vagrancy laws. That's clearly political and clearly has to do with the park because the vagrancy laws are there to keep people out of the park. So I don't see where there is this clear distinction between civil society and the political. And also, interestingly enough, I don't think American elections as they stand now are fundamentally political. I'm very tempted to just get kind of Rousseauian on it, which is the people are allowed voice one day a year, and in it they only prove that they should fall silent. I believe is what they said. In addition, so first off, a massive criticism of the very conceptual framework that civil society depends on or depends on to have civil society. But also, here's a question, and it's an open question, and it may be true for some, and it may not be true for others. But I frequently find myself over and over and over and over and over again asking questions: are we communists or aren't we? And the question is, when I founded and started kicking off Utah Against Police Brutality, I had a lot of left-leaning liberals and anarchists who wanted to do cop watch. And I was like, okay, you want to do cop watch? Okay, go do cop watch. You know how many times I did cop watch? 0 times. 0 times I did cop watch. However, once they started killing people, which they did frequently, and it's a matter of public record. You can look up the news and the news stories and the newspaper articles. I was out there saying, no, you can't do this, making a political demand that they related to this, the cop that killed them get fired, and that the laws change to not allow the ongoing murder of primarily Black and brown people in Utah. So what I think is we need to make those demands, those mass demands, which any right-thinking liberal, and in fact, even a conservative former sheriff from Texas actually supported. We need to keep that conscious. We need to be clear about that. But then we also need to be clear about what we're doing and what we're saying and what we're advocating as communists or anarchists or social democrats or whatever you call yourself, to be determined.
Thank you, Greg. Jonah, did you want to say something on this topic?
Yeah, sure. I think I agree with just about everything that's been said. I'd certainly call myself a communist. And I think that we should move towards being more open about that. The way I see it, communism is the end goal of socialism. Pretty much the same thing. If that makes the right freak out, more to power to us. But yeah, and I agree that we need to view services as complementary to political work. You don't do either one without the other. And we can expand services into regions where we don't have a presence right now by trying to standardize membership dues in organizations like DSA. With more dues, we can recruit more staff, and then we can send staff out into the areas where we don't currently have a presence. I think it's important to remember that the areas where the Bernie campaign was strongest were the areas where they had a lot of paid staff hitting the ground early on. And that's a model we need to remember. Instead of just relying entirely on volunteer labor, we have to cultivate some red professionalism in our organizations. And yeah, we use the civil services to complement our political work. If we do a free breakfast program, we give out a pamphlet with our political demands on top of it. And we use our electoral work to publicize the constituent services that we're providing. Our candidates, they hop up on a soapbox and they talk about their demands to reform the police service. And then while they're holding their campaign rally, they funnel people into a cop watch at the same time. We can really use these things together. They're not mutually exclusive. And yeah, so I would disagree with Greg's idea that elections can't be political. We just need to rethink the way that we do elections. And that doesn't mean denouncing left Democrats as they stand right now. We've learned a lot from Bernie. We've learned a lot from AOC. But we just have to rethink the way that we do elections and try to roll out a new model of it.
Thank you, Jonah. Okay, so moving forward, we have quite a few questions here. So everybody, try and keep your answers to just a few minutes. Okay, this next question is for Benjamin, Greg, and Jonah, and it's from Danny. Danny says, Gerald, it's also for you, but you might just agree with him. So the question is, the issue with saying the Republicans are more right-wing is that it becomes a final fallback position every election. It already apologizes for the Democrats and treats them as the lesser evil, even if the Democrats are called imperialist or corporatist or even American fascism. The issue with turning towards the Republican Party is that it repats the problem that the left already did with the Democrats in the 1930s, which was the Republicans are just treated as being more Democrat, more about the working class than the Democratic Party, which still claims to represent the working class. Rather than posing oneself towards the Republicans or the Democrats or even to the left of them, shouldn't we think how to break out of the Republican Democratic continuum? how could that be done? Maybe how both parties cut the left and right is itself ideological. And he also had an addendum. He wanted to add that even the left that rejects the Democrats and Republicans accept how they constitute politics. In other words, workers versus anti-oppression, white males versus minorities, and so on. So, he's saying that the left kind of mimics, even the ones that reject both parties, kind of mimics the way both parties um, uh, organize politics, divvy out politics, constitute their politics. So I will leave that open to all of the panelists. Benjamin?
Yeah, I think that both parties are fundamentally similar on economic issues. I don't think there's much which distinguishes them at all. They're mainly different in terms of which cultural and aesthetic buttons they push and what kind of catharsis they offer to people. And for that reason, I don't think that we need a strategy which is trying to capture just one or the other. Indeed, I think each one would be helped by having the other also as an option and also as something which is pursued concurrently. If I thought that we could construct a party, another ballot line, which would be competitive, or if I thought that we could run independents and have independents work as a ballot line, I would advocate for that. But I don't think that those approaches can work because of the specific legal structure that we're under, and because of the difficulty in persuading large numbers of people in many parts of the country that an independent is competitive. We're always running up against this reality that most people think that someone who's not running as a Democrat or a Republican isn't competitive. So even if they like what they're doing, they're not willing to consider voting for that person. If we have capture movements, and ideally I'd like one organization to do both. I'd like an organization which includes people from multiple sides of the cultural divide who come together on agreed upon economic policies that they want all of their candidates to pursue. And where they don't agree on social issues, I want them to leave their candidates alone and let their candidates have a level of autonomy, right? But they can pick specific people to run in specific races on specific ballot lines and make those decisions together. I would ideally like to have two committees, one which inclines a little bit one way and one the other, which have to come together and agree on policy and which have to come together and agree on candidates, ballot lines, and races. And I think that if we could do that, we could start to build across this cultural division instead of continuing to reify it through the demonization of Republicans, the demonization of rural people, religious people, people who have family values. I don't think that any of that stuff is necessarily anathema to us. And if you go back to the 30s, if we want to talk about history, the farmer labor movement, there was a clear rural element in the communist movement in the 30s, in the left movement in the 30s. We can't have a strategy which is exclusively about cities. And if we do, we will just become a device for enabling the Democrats to continue to produce AOC types who, in my view, just shepherd most left-wing people back to the establishment Democrats. And we may try to resist it and we may try to fight back, but we're always operating at a competitive disadvantage when they do that. And we tend to lose.
Okay, great. Would anyone else like to respond to this question? Go ahead, Jonah.
Okay, sure. Let me think for 1 minute. Yeah, so I do think that the dichotomy that we have saying Democrats are better, Republicans are worse. We need to vote for better and back the Democrats. It's this very shallow utilitarian philosophy where we're just thinking only about, is this good or bad? And who knows what's good or bad? I think that the fact that we're speaking in such vague terms shows that the left does not have clear political goals. If we had clear goals, we would be asking more interesting questions than, is this good or bad? Smiley face, frowny face. And I think that our goal should be to build an independent political movement. And when you look at somebody like Joe Biden with that goal in mind, things become much more clear. If our goal is to build an independent political movement, we cannot work for people like Joe Biden. I think, and I agree, we need to cut across this cultural, almost sectarian divide in this country. I think that one way we do that actually is by running independent campaigns. And you're right, Ben, it's very difficult to win. But Bernie won in the 1980s in a much less favorable political environment in Vermont. And he was able to appeal to both the urban population in Burlington and rural areas. They actually called that their donut theory, that we get the inner cities and the outer rural areas in a coalition to win Bernie's congressional seat. So I think that there's real potential to run some socialist independence in the coming years. I think that that should be our default position. And I think that one way that we could grab a foothold for ourselves early on would be running in some of the gerrymandered deep blue districts and the deep red districts where we have one party rule and the same candidate or incumbent has been winning over and over again. We can offer a choice to these people. Say, look, there's no chance of vote splitting here. It's been a Republican in power for the past 10 years. Give an independent a try. And by doing that, we can construct these regional two-party systems and start to expand out from there. So that's my philosophy for how we should try to break out of that dichotomy.
Okay, thank you, Jonah. Go ahead, Gerald.
So I can see that Benjamin is one of our theoreticians, and that's very good. But Benjamin, I have to admit to you, while I'm quite acquainted with the theories and the program of Marxism, I am a little bit more into the praxis side of things, and I'm much more comfortable explaining my position through that. So, for instance, when we had our school movement, Sister Claire created this little coloring book, which I, of course, poo-pooed and said, what the hell, a coloring book? We trying to make a real, get that shit out of here. Well, guess what? Wound up being a big hit. We worked, all right, the school justice movement worked the food lines once the pandemic, really got bad. So we had to have access to the workers. So the only thing we could do was we set up tables at the food lines where people were coming to get food at the schools that distributed the food. First thing we say to the workers, do you have any kids? Yeah, 3. Here you go. We give them the comic, the coloring book, which has a page in it that tells them which helps them about their COVID tests and all about the COVID checks and all of that shit. And also about the privatization of these schools and what we need to be doing in the upcoming election. This is how we built our base. This is how we defeated Go Public Schools. It was hard work. And I think, so one thing we have a slight I have a mass perspective. Everything I do, I try to work with working people. I'm not against theory. I'm not anti-theoretical, but I believe it has no value if you don't use it in the struggle. So that's something we did. Also, I should just tell you, I work with a group called the Red Republicans, and what we're trying to do is to unite the left of the DSA. And I think it can be done. I'm listening. I'm very interested in listening to everyone. I think this can be done. I'm optimistic about this. And if we do this successfully, you know what? Maybe we'll have the organizational muscle to actually carry out some visible activities that the workers can see and relate to. So, and by the way, I just want to tell you, I don't support Jacobin. Okay, that's what I support. It's a magazine called Spectre. I helped to launch it best I can. I'm old as water now, so take it easy on me. It's not perfect, but I look at it as an alternative to Jacobin. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Gerald. Greg, go ahead if you're there.
Yes, and that is always the question. So first off, I think that there, and maybe we can talk about this some other time, some other panel, or just on Facebook. I think there needs to be a distinction made between the mass work that you do, and you're like getting everybody involved, and the red work where you're explicitly communist, you're flying the hammer and sickle. Now, I mean, this is concrete. When we were doing immigration work at the Utah State Capitol, I was literally waving the red flag around, as were others, and the anarchist comrades were waving the black flag. We were out actively just like communist, anarchist, you can go to hell-ist, because they were trying to introduce SB 1070. Now, we didn't stop being communists. We didn't compromise our positions being communists or anarchists, as some were then. But here's the thing. We worked and were invited. I personally was invited, and I'm still very good friends with one of the people, invited to the Republican Hispanic Caucus. And they actually became really interested, and they would actually feed us information. Hey, just so you know, there's this person's going to give a photo op. It's not going out to the public, but just so you know, I mean, literally, when Trump in 2015 came to Utah, it was a Republican who messaged me and said, hey, and I'm not going to give any details about who he is, but he's like, hey, just so you know, Trump is coming this weekend. I know that his people say it's canceled it's up in the air. He's coming this weekend. And they're trying to get you to cancel what you had already planned. Look, the thing was, it's issues that form the mass work. It's issues, I don't care whether, there are lots of Republicans, like right-wing Republicans who are against abortion, against those immigrant and illegals taking our jobs, who can support some school project to have better schools for their kids and better schools for everybody's kids. And the thing is, what you've got to do is you've got to understand that being a communist means fighting for workers, but that doesn't mean abandoning or hiding or in any way, shape or form, pretending not to be communist for the sake of getting along to get along. And in any case, I'm sorry, I do ramble on.
No, that's all right, bro.
Thank you, Greg. All right, so looks like we'll have enough time for one, maybe two more questions before closing remarks. So we've got a couple hands raised, and I'm gonna call on Pamela Nogales. Pam, you there? Okay.
All right, I'm here.
Hey.
The working inside and outside of the Democratic Party dominated the DSA, right? In what way has this strategy failed? And what would working, quote unquote, outside of the Democratic Party look like? What kind of civil society organization would the left need to build to create the conditions for socialism? That's it.
Oh, just to say, all you need is just exactly how to get socialism. If we had the answer to that, we would be doing it on the People's Zoom, and that it would be clear. But in any case, I'm sorry. I just want to make it clear. I'm not speaking for anyone else in this panel, but if you're asking for answers, I don't have answers. I have suggestions or what I think is a good idea, and maybe we should try it, and then we'll know whether it's a good idea or not. But there isn't, in my view, and again, I'm more than happy to hear different from the other panelists. It is clear that there is not it's clear that there isn't anything clear, just to say.
Go ahead, Gerald. Oh,
All right, this is for Pam.
Yeah.
Pam, I just went through an experience where on the down ballot elections for school board, I provided most of the leadership for that and pulled a coalition together for that. So we actually had a program and an approach. The program was against the privatization of the schools. The approach was to attack the billionaire support, the out-of-town billionaires that were supporting these pro-privatization and pro-charter school candidates. I am open to criticism. Pam, I don't think I'm perfect, but we did kick their ass, and I'm glad we did. Now, the problem is, while don't kid yourself, Pam, the people know when we show up, they say, here come the socialists. We got red banners, red t-shirts. They know, the workers know who we are, and we don't hide who we are. But I still do not claim perfection, and I'm open to any serious criticism of our campaign, even though I think we did okay. The problem with the DSA being inside the Democratic Party, Pam, is that the DSA is something that is called tailist. They tend to follow the already pro-corporate Democratic leadership, and that's a real problem. So it's not just because you in there working, it don't mean you raising the red flag. Okay, I agree with Greg on that. Whatever we do, we at least, I mean, Marx over and over again argued for the political independence of the working class from the beginning. I want to stop there and let my other comrades speak.
Well, I think it kind of proves that the inside-outside approach, which defines inside as working through the Democratic Party and outside as civil society activity, doesn't work. Civil society activity has a role to play. I'm not saying that it doesn't, but their inside-outside approach also has to be replicated at the level of electoral politics. We have to be inside the major, the Democratic Party, but we also have to be inside some other parties. And the problem with the independents and the third parties is that they're too small, they're too weak, they're too legally limited. If we're also inside the Republican Party, then we really get neutrality through having two counterweights, which means if one of those establishments really turns the screws on us, we can shift focus and shift energy. We have some kind of response we can make when they betray us and they don't maintain alignment with us. So I think inside outside has to be broadened out. The problem with the DSA is that the DSA has focused on winning traditional blue gerrymandered districts. As it's done that, it has become more and more like the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party tries to win gerrymandered blue districts. The Democratic Party is designed to win gerrymandered blue districts. And so if you are copying that and you're only competing in those areas where you have the numbers to do the civil society activity, so that's where you're going to run candidates because that's where you've got the people, you end up looking identical to the Democratic Party. And you can be identical to the Democratic Party even if you're flying red flags, even if you're calling yourself a communist, an anarchist, a socialist, or any number of things. If you're running the same kind of campaign to win over the same kind of voters in the same kind of district, you're going to end up looking like the same kind of thing. So we have to start from what does winning in a rural district require? What does it mean to win in a gerrymandered red district or a district which is a little bit mixed? What does that look like? If we don't start from that question of where do we need to have a foot to be competitive in those kinds of places? Everything we do just leads us right back to the same place, right back to replicating progressive liberalism with different names and different colors and different hats. And we end up just doing the same thing everybody has been doing for decades and decades and decades. As long as we have this, we can't touch the Republican Party because they're the bad man thing, we are going to keep replicating the Democrats because our people live in Democratic districts, and what works in Democratic districts is what Democrats do. That's why those are Democratic districts.
Thank you, Ben. Jonah, did you want to respond?
Sure. So yeah, and I'll just respond to the question that you asked directly to me as well, Pam. I think that we establish our political independence by becoming a coherent political organization. It's not just the act of trying to pursue a ballot line in our own right that makes us independent. We have to come up with clear goals as an organization and run our candidates in a disciplined way. And I think that step one to that is just have a damn platform, an actual comprehensive set of policies that all of our national candidates are willing to fight for. And we could have state level platforms too to complement those. But we have a platform that if it were implemented in full, that it would put the working class in power in this country. That's the framework that I buy into. Step two, it would just be run a slate. We could set up a program at the national level of DSA to try to encourage local organizations to seek out members to recruit, to run primarily for the House of Representatives. And I think that I really still disagree with Ben on the futility of running independent candidates. I've done some legal research on this, and if you look at a map, about half of all U.S. states still have ballot access parity for independents. Most Texas, Florida, and California, it's actually quite easy to get on the ballot as an independent in those states. So why would we run Democrats there when we have an opportunity to get on the ballot pretty easily? It's obviously it is an uphill battle, but it sets us apart from the crowd in a really useful way, shows that we're out to beat the two-party system. And you talked about gerrymandered districts, and you're right, the strategy that we've relied on has often involved running in Democratic primaries in blue districts. And that has downsides because it relies on low voter turnout. And if we go into Republican districts, we'll be doing the exact same thing. We'll be appealing to a very small audience that's engaged within the Republican primary, instead of making a generalized appeal to the entire electorate in those districts. So I think that there's still an advantage to running socialist independents in both blue and red districts.
Okay, thank you, Jonah. So we are coming up to the end of the hour here. So I'm going to ask all of the speakers just to take 2 or 3 minutes, if you want, to offer some closing remarks, and maybe fold in any remaining responses or answers to questions that you feel you didn't get a chance to address. So we'll go in the same order here again as the original speakers. So starting with Benjamin.
Yeah, so of course the reason, yes, Jonah's right to point out that Bernie Sanders won as an independent, and it's not as if it's impossible to win as an independent, and being on a ballot as an independent is better than not being on a ballot at all. The trouble is that it's very difficult to do this at scale, because in every race, without a competitive party's backing, you have to prove that you can win, and that becomes an impediment to getting on, and you get immediately accused of splitting the vote in a way which disfavors the candidate who would otherwise be more likely to win, except when you run in those heavily gerrymandered districts. And when you run in those heavily gerrymandered districts, you end up with candidates who say things that damage the credibility of the movement nationally, because those candidates only have to please their own gerrymandered district. So if you look at AOC, she only has to please that district in New York. She can say things that can be put on Fox News and used to damage candidates running in different parts of the country, in red districts, in more neutral districts, and she can undermine the credibility of our whole movement in all the other districts. And it doesn't matter, because she only relies on that blue district to get reelected. And the more time we spend focusing on people like AOC, the more time we spend in this bubble of these blue gerrymandered districts, thinking like Democrats, talking to Democrats, interacting with Democrats. And if you do that, you're going to end up with a platform that is a Democratic platform. You're going to end up with political instincts that are Democratic instincts, and you're going to replicate everything that they do wrong without even meaning to. And you can continue to fly the red flag while you do it. We have got to actually go to the districts that are different from these districts and actually engage and talk to people. And it can't just be, oh, I'm going to send my educated cadre of people from New York to rural Indiana, because people aren't going to go for that. People don't want outsiders coming in telling them how to organize and how to run things. We got to actually think about, how do we find these people who currently think of us as the anathema because they associate us with AOC and the squad? But these people hate the corporations. They are tired of being exploited. They're tired of being treated like garbage. They have to be leaders in our movement. We can't just go send people out there to try to round them up. They have to lead, and we have to include them. And that means we got to be open to them. And as long as we've got this strategy of catering to whatever people in New York or whatever people in the Bay or Philadelphia or Chicago or any of these cities want, as long as that's the strategy, we're just going to drive these people away. We're going to drive them into the Republican Party. They're going to go more and more right wing, and they're going to beat us. They're going to kick our butts, and we're going to lose. And they're going to get the senators. They're going to get the members of Congress, because they're the ones who are engaging with more of the country than we are at this stage. And we have to be very realistic about how many people don't share the cultural values of people in the city, about how many people have different values, different ways of orienting their life. And we have to be genuinely pluralist about who we are willing to accept and what kinds of cultural values we're willing to accept. Genuinely pluralist, not just fake pluralist. So that would be my argument.
Thank you, Benjamin. All right, so next we will turn to Gerald for closing remarks.
Very interesting discussion. And I don't want people to interpret my critical remarks as some kind of a vicious, nasty slash and run. I want you to talk to Platypus. I want all of you to have my email if you wish. I do the best I can. I told you now, I'm old as water, so I'm slow. Okay. But Ben, I think, while I think the thrust of what you say is absolutely correct, and I support it, there's some major, when you start dealing with theory on the level that you're dealing with it, it's like, let's say if we're shooting at a target and we're 30 feet away, but we're 1 degree off. Every time you step back, you're going to miss that target by more and more, if you understand what I'm trying to convey to you. What I'm trying to say, Ben, is that socialist consciousness cannot be spontaneously generated from the masses. I think this is where old crazy Gregory is probably right. That is, I think Lenin was right on this matter. I think that Lenin was right that socialist consciousness has to be prepared and brought to the masses by a revolutionary organization. It is not going to be spontaneously. And therefore, in some ways, the people that you are recommending to lead, I think you're right that these are the people we want to lead, but they need to be prepared to lead. And that requires a revolutionary organization. I also, Greg, you got to study the third period, bro. You really got to, because all of the healthy young Stalinists that I know are turning to the third period, and they think that this was the golden period of communism. But actually, there are severe problems that you need to be acquainted with. You can contact me, but you don't need me to study that. You need to study it, look at it more closely. And then finally, I just want to bring up, look, my optimism has led me, I'm actually making a film right now. And the time for this film has come. It's called The Cops and the Klan Go Hand in Hand. I'm very fortunate, all Black crew, conscious crew. And it's, I think it's going to work out well. But I think also that we want to consider alternatives to this Jacobin talking about Kautsky was right and all this nonsense. Listen, I am trying to also support Spectre because I want it to be a bona fide alternative. And I want to tell you, we do need physical alternatives and institutions that we can rally people to. Ben, it is not impossible. I believe that revolutionary optimism is not a myth. I think there's a material basis for it, and I live it. And as long as I live, that's gonna be my belief. I'm gonna continue to fight to bring the socialist program in a way that workers can understand it to them. Shorter work week with no loss in pay, healthcare for everyone. I consider these transitional demands that are essential. So I don't know how much we disagree really, but I do disagree on not that we shouldn't do work in the Republicans per se, but that should be our main work. I think election work should not be our main outlet. My understanding and my experience tells me that yes, we certainly don't want to ignore elections and just let the billionaires take over our schools without resistance. But at the same time, it is not the major task that revolutionaries need to perform. in my opinion, in our base building. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Gerald. Next, Greg.
All right. So I'm sorry. I know you said we could use this to address some questions I didn't get to. Just to say, I'm well versed in the Stalin's third period, and also maybe I look young. I'm not. I'm besides you. I'm probably the oldest guy here. So I mean, you know, you have wisdom. I got old age. But yeah. Even so, there's something that I think really needs to be. There's two things that need to be addressed. First thing, and I think, no offense to the other panelists, most important thing that needs to be addressed is to you. And this is something the left, however you want to call it, needs to get through its fucking head. You can talk about and learn from the past, absolutely. I mean, that's not Marx. That's when you were 3 years old and your parent tells you you can learn stuff. If that's hot, don't touch it. It only takes one burn and you realize I shouldn't touch that. So that's the thing, is studying the past. I know about Stalin's third period and its ultimate reaction, which was, I even talked about it to Popular Front, which I think was a rightist term and was incorrect. The United Front was the in fact correct term for anyone who's listening and cares. But here's the thing. We need to learn from history, but more than that, we need to start making history. And political problems aside, I think in May 68, they had the right slogan, which is be practical, do the impossible. And that segues into my other thing. Yes, we're talking about Trump and Biden and the elections of Trump and Biden and who's better or who's worse or how to judge them. I did not, in any shape or form, understand that question to be a question of electoral politics. And I want to be clear. It wasn't that, oh, wow, you're talking about electoral politics. How did that happen? I made a conscious choice, and I'm not criticizing you, because I think we're at such a low point in the movement that if you think something will work and if you think this is a better way to do it, then go do it. I'm not going to go do it. I'm not going to follow you into the, into that area of action, we'll say. But I don't think that's what we need right now. Also, if you think I'm wrong, then I say, then ignore me and go do that. But don't try and get everyone else to do that and say everyone who isn't doing that is terrible and sucks. And I'm not saying you're terrible or suck, but I'm saying you do what you think is correct, and you do that, and then come back to us and tell us how that worked. But in any case, once again, I want to give my immense gratitude to Platypus and my connection errors and the frantic router replugging and all of that. And I hope this has been useful in some way to someone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, go ahead, Jonah.
Oh, I didn't have anything off the top of my head. Really do appreciate you all having me on.
Yeah,
it's been a great discussion.
Great, thank you, Jonah. And I'd like to give a massive thank you to all of our panelists. We really appreciate you participating in this. I think it's been a very great discussion. As a reminder, you can find our virtual activities at platypus1917.org/virtual. We would like for this discussion to remain an open one and continue. So if you have thoughts about this discussion, you can submit those to the Platypus Review as an article reflection. And in order to do that, just reach out to editor at platypus1917.org. And yeah, I'd like to thank the audience as well, everyone who came, in addition to the panelists, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks again.